But it's very common for presidents upon their inauguration to write executive branch officials and invite them to consider resigning in place of a new appointee. There's a theory, I guess, possibly, I'm not sure how it would work at the commission, where Mr. Gensler could remain a commissioner, but not serve as the chairman of the commission, so he would keep a commission seat.
This content is brought to you by BitGo, which is one of the top crypto custodians in the crypto industry. BitGo works with many big companies and brands, such as Pantera Capital, Bitstamp, and Bitcoin IRA. Nike also selected BitGo to power its wallets for its NFTs. And BitGo has many great services, such as hot wallets, custodial wallets, self-managed cold wallets, and NFT wallets. Many institutions trust BitGo with its top-level security and incredible services, such as being able to deploy your capital while it's in custody, which includes lending, borrowing, trading, staking, DeFi access, and more. If you'd like to learn more about BitGo, please visit bitgo.com, link in the description. Welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and my guest today is Congressman French Hill, who's a Republican out of the state of Arkansas. Congressman Hill is also the chairman of the House Financial Services Subcommittee on Digital Assets, Financial Technology, and Inclusion. Congressman Hill, great to have you back on.
Tony, great to be with you. And I was looking back, I think the last time we were together was right after the big House of Representatives vote, overwhelming bipartisan vote in favor of the regulatory framework bill back in May. So think of all the things that have happened since then.
Oh, absolutely, Congressman Hill. I can't even keep up nowadays. There's a lot of hearings, and really, that was a big moment of that bill, the Fit 21 bill, making it out of the House. So I guess it's a good segue into the big question everyone has. Will we see a bill of that nature make it through the Senate by the end of the year?
Well, that's a big question. In the lame duck session, it's really unpredictable. But since May, what I've been impressed with is the fact that we've had several things happen that I think are encouraging to potential compromise with the Senate, such as the exchange traded product decisions by the SEC, the change in the enforcement division at the SEC, the bipartisan vote on how members felt about the staff accounting bulletin 121 and continued letters being exchanged on that. And then finally, Senator Hagerty's proposal to submit some draft legislation about stablecoins. All that's been positive on the Capitol Hill front. And on the national campaign front, we've seen Donald Trump go to Nashville. I was with him in Nashville at the Bitcoin conference. I was with him at his roundtable and in his remarks to the attendees. And he's definitely made a strong commitment to the importance of digital assets and crypto in America's future financial innovation. I was very pleased to see that. And that prompted a reaction from the Harris campaign, led by pro-innovation Democrats on the Harris campaign to try to get Vice President Harris to engage. So these are big trends that will aid that discussion here in the lame duck, which is why I mentioned them. Potentially, we could see progress on Fit 21, the regulatory framework bill, perhaps as a part of the Farm Bill reauthorization, because in the Senate, Fit 21 type regulatory structure is in the domain over in the Senate Agriculture Committee, which opens the door potentially to having that discussion, since we've had our successful markup and debate in both the House and Financial Services Committee in the House. And then on stablecoins, very interesting. Senator Hagerty's move is taking a different approach, but it's a very constructive approach, I thought. So, Tony, I would say it's a possibility, but if we don't make it across the finish line at the end of the year, it'll be a top priority for the committee in the new year.
Oh, sure. That was going to be my next question. If it doesn't happen at the end of the year, is 2025 a possibility? So it sounds like it is. Are you thinking Q1, Q2? I don't know the schedule and how Congress, will vote in these
Yeah.
things, but are you thinking like Q2?
I think with the progress we've made in talking to senators, it would be great if in Q1 we got bills reintroduced in both the House and Senate. We had hearings in Q1, and then we would be aiming toward markup and passage in Q2. Um, all that groundwork's been laid, but in each Congress, a lot of people don't know this. You have to reintroduce bills. You've got all these new members of Congress. We'll probably have well over 60 new members of the House that have to be re-educated on the topic. So there's some startup costs associated with legislating in a new Congress. But look, all the work of the past 4 years by crypto ecosystem members of Congress doing their due diligence, doing work, and the hard work on the House Agriculture and House Financial Service Committee will pay off in the new year.
Oh, absolutely. And Congressman Hill, I've noticed crypto's done a lot of spending in this election cycle, and I just saw an article from Politico this morning saying this upcoming Congress will be the most pro-crypto ever. What are your thoughts on crypto's impact on in the elections? And obviously, you mentioned Donald Trump. He's the pro-crypto candidate for the most part. So, what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, it all starts with member education. I think out in the public domain, Tony, people have it backwards. They think that somehow political contributions are where it starts, and it actually starts the exact opposite, which is venture capitalists, innovators, company CEOs, market participants all come to Capitol Hill and spend years educating to produce the kinds of work products that we saw in the House and Senate committees. And then once you are able to see the legislation come to fruition
Mm,
and see where people stand on the legislation from all the work that they've done, then I think you see that campaign contribution come to light and be more actively engaged because they're seeing, well, who is interested in supporting that kind of legislation and who isn't.
mm.
And so, in a way, it's to me, it's not a chicken and egg thing. I think it's the hard work of people to do member education, help write legislation, have design hearings, hold hearings, design debate, and then you've seen because we've had some legislative success that allows the financial supporters in the digital asset space to go, hey, do you support this kind of legislation or not? So I think that's been a big part of this cycle for both Democrats and for Republicans.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, Congressman, there was some big news that came out last week, the largest acquisition in the crypto industry, and that was Stripe acquiring Bridge, which is a stablecoin infrastructure company, and it was for $1.1 billion. The stablecoin market is heating up. So, going back to the stablecoin topic that you mentioned earlier, when could we
Yeah.
possibly see a stablecoin bill make it out of the House? And and correct me if I'm wrong here, does it need to go through the House, or can it be packaged with the market structure bill through the Senate?
Well, it's such a good question. They're two different constituencies, which is why these bills have not moved in the same track.
Mm,
So Congressman McHenry, the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, working with Maxine Waters, the ranking Democrat on the committee, have a good, functional, working draft of a dollar-backed stablecoin
mm,
bill that's largely complete, that has full input from the executive branch of the United States.
mm,
And as I said, Bill Hagerty of Tennessee, the senator from Tennessee, has introduced a different approach, but an equally constructive approach. So it's possible that we could get a stablecoin bill in the lame duck under a different scenario, like a amendment to the National Defense Authorization Bill, if it has a financial services title. And that's because you've got strong bipartisan work on that draft, even though it has not gone across the House floor.
mm.
So I think that's a possibility. Uh, but I'm not willing to say today. I think they'll both be connected. They may well be on different tracks, or they may not. This is how the very dynamic situation in a lame duck may come together.
Ah, okay. Yeah, because I was a bit confused by that to your point of Senator Haggerty's move, and I'm scratching my head. Well, doesn't a bill have to make it through the House first, or maybe not? But so I appreciate that clarity. Um, what do you think about the dynamic of the stablecoin market and where you have the private sector working on all these great innovations? You have a lot of players entering in,
Yep.
and there's talks of the Fed potentially working on a digital dollar CBDC, which in itself is a controversial topic. Do you think the United States government will lean more towards the private sector and say, we'll embrace these US backed stable coins versus us creating a digital dollar?
I think based on the meetings I've had during the years with Treasury and Fed officials, that they can be comfortable with a privately issued dollar-backed stable coin as a tokenized payment for use on a blockchain. Congress is not supportive of a retail CBDC put forward by the Fed. They've been very clear. We passed a bill across the House floor. We got a few Democratic votes for it that says you may not offer essentially a retail CBDC, issue a Fed-based central bank digital currency without a specific authorization of the Congress. I think that's where Chairman Powell has been for some time. So that's why I believe that as a new payment rail on a blockchain, that a dollar-backed stablecoin regulated under the United States laws and rules is the way forward for the future.
Hmm. Let's go back to Donald Trump and even Senator Cynthia Lummis proposing the idea of Bitcoin being a U.S. reserve asset, same way, central banks hold gold. What are your thoughts on that? We know the United States has a debt issue. Part of that is too much spending, right? Too much big government. And
Yeah.
yes, you can cut some of the spending, but how do we solve this problem? Is Bitcoin a solution?
I think that remains to be seen on the future there. I thought President Trump probably said it best when he was in Nashville, which was where we've taken Bitcoin back in a settlement issue as a part of a federal claim, that he would recommend that the Treasury simply hold on to it. And that way you can have your cake and eat it too effectively, as we see what the future for Bitcoin holds. Um, Naturally, most of the Fed balance sheet or Treasury balance sheet should be, highly liquid securities. And I think we do have a sustainability in finance that's not going to be solved by what you're holding in the portfolio. It really is solved by Republicans and Democrats getting together, putting their heads together, and having bipartisan solutions to the long-term finance challenges that we have in mandatory spending programs, which are two-thirds of federal spending. And that's what we have to tackle. And the next president's going to be confronted with that because we have $2 trillion deficits forecast from the Joe Biden days, and we have some tax cuts and investment incentives expiring in 2025, and all that's got to be reconciled.
Absolutely. A question that may be a little bit off topic, and it's in itself a whole other podcast. In the 70s, under President Nixon, the United States went off the gold standard. Do you think sometime in the future we may go back to a gold standard, but it's coupled with Bitcoin, right? So, or maybe it's tokenized gold because gold will be on the blockchain. You have more transparency. You have a more accuracy as to the supply. So you have these two hard assets tied to the US dollar again.
Well, the king dollar is still the reserve currency of the world. The biggest concern I have about it is our sustainability of the fiscal deficit in the federal government. That is, to me, job one of the Congress and the executive branch. On the subject of backing the dollar instead of a purely what Jim Grant calls a PhD standard for instead of the gold standard. Um, we are certainly in a position where we could use both Bitcoin or gold as a signal to the value of the dollar, even if it's not strictly backed by it. As you know, many countries have an exchange, either it's tied, their currency is tied to the dollar, or it's a currency basket that's tied to the dollar. And so you could add Bitcoin or gold as a basket item in setting the money supply. And people have experimented with that, but as the U.S. has become the reserve currency and the biggest economy in the world, that's gotten harder and harder to do. So I wouldn't forecast the outcome you designed, but people have offered it as a marker. And you've seen gold advance quite significantly over the years, which is always a harbor to me that we need to get this fiscal house in order.
Absolutely. Now, one of the statements President Donald Trump said at the Bitcoin conference is that he would fire SEC Chair Gary Gensler on the first day back in office. And many folks are wondering, how would he go about doing that? Is it simply just
Yeah.
appointing a new SEC chair?
Well, it is an independent agency, and the chairman of the SEC serves a term in office, and Chairman Gensler's technical term in office expires, I think, in June 2026. So it's not an automatic issue. The courts are not clear on this because the Securities and Exchange Commission is an independent agency. But it's very common for presidents upon their inauguration to write executive branch officials and invite them to consider resigning in place of a new appointee. There's a theory, I guess, possibly, I'm not sure how it would work at the commission, where Mr. Gensler could remain a commissioner, but not serve as the chairman of the commission. So he would keep a commission seat, but a Trump person would serve as chairman of the SEC. So this is a bit up in the air because it's unclear. Uh, and But that was a big rallying cry in Nashville at the Bitcoin conference. There's no doubt. And look, I don't think Chairman Gensler has done a good job at the SEC, particularly in the area of digital assets. And it's my hope that a future President Trump or a future President Kamala Harris would make a change at the top of that agency and engage someone else that is pro-innovation, uses the powers of the SEC for exemptive relief, where they want to experiment in one of these new areas and build consensus on the commission instead of being so adversarial or in some ways even condescending by saying, well, just come in and register. That is not an appropriate position for the commission. And obviously, Commissioner Hester Peirce has done a fine job explaining to the public while that's not an effective leadership strategy by Chairman Gensler. So I hope in 2025, Tony, that we'll have a new chair for the SEC, regardless of who wins the presidential campaign.
Absolutely. My hope is that it is Hester Peirce, but I don't know if she wants the job, but she would be a great candidate.
She'd be terrific.
Now, there was a hearing last month, a DeFi hearing, and it was Congress's first DeFi hearing. Tell us about
Right.
that and the goal of that hearing.
Yeah, this was something that we wanted to do, and we worked with the congressional calendar, and I'm so glad we got that done before we took the campaign break during October. We had participants come in and talk about tokenization of real assets and start educating members about how DeFi works. And it was really an informative hearing. And I got lots of positive feedback from members on it. We had Coin Center there, Polygon Labs, and others. And to me, this is the best way to educate members is to use examples and show what people are doing in decentralized finance and break down some of the charges and counter charges I hear about this,
Mm.
and also in that this area of tokenization of, real world assets as well. So it was just a first stop. I thought it was an excellent hearing. I encourage people to go out on YouTube at the Financial Services Committee and check that hearing out. I got a lot of, as I said, feedback from members that was positive. And when we get the new Congress in the first year, we want to continue a set of hearings on that.
Yeah, it was a great hearing. I was surprised by the turnout and the engagement. It was really great. So I definitely echo your statements. I want to see more of that in Congress engaging and learning and educating. So that's really great stuff. Um, One of the things I just came to mind, SAB 121, we talked about it in passing earlier. I was
Yeah.
hearing about a bill that would override that, but the SEC has been kind of letting some banks through, like BNY Mellon and so forth. These are things I've been reading, but I'm not sure if they're 100%
Yeah.
confirmed. Is there a way to bypass that?
Yeah. Unfortunately, no. But look, I do not believe that the commission should cherry pick solutions in Staff Accounting Bulletin 121. They need to simply repropose the rule and do it in the right way. And I don't believe that, for example, that they should have swept in the traditional bank custodians. You name Bank of New York Mellon. These are exactly the kinds of high quality custodians that you would want to facilitate holding a person if they want a third party custodian, to have that authority. And that's why the rule is so counterproductive.
Hmm.
Um, it actually goes against the intent that I think Chairman Gensler initially held. But I don't think we should cherry pick. I think we should withdraw the rule and put out a new rule. I don't think he should try to grant, uh, as I say, selectively pick people to not apply the rule to. I think that just creates more confusion, more risk of regulation by enforcement. I think that's a bad approach by the commission.
Yeah, and I'm really scratching my head as to what they're trying to achieve here when you have the regulated institutions who have a track record, who,
Yep.
yeah, why would you not want them to custody funds, especially in a post FTX world? Like we saw what happened
Right.
in FTX. I would love for a JP Morgan or BNY Mellon, whoever, to custody the funds because one, it removes the centralization around Coinbase and certain custodians. And then you have the biggest custodians in the world who are regulated
Yep.
to participate. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the irony. I mean, he says he was concerned about bankruptcy inclusive risk of the token, and yet he's saying to the traditional custodians with all the authority, the computer assessment to do it, the financial strength, well, you can't do it. And the can't, for people who don't know this topic, if I put up $100,000 of Bitcoin to be held in trust or in a custodial account, the way Staff Accounting Bulletin 121 works is the bank custodian, BNY Mellon to use your example, has to take $100,000 of my cash and offset that on the bank balance sheet as if it's a risk to the bank on the value or location of that Bitcoin. So this is super ignorant, I would say, of how the custodial process work, and it actually pushes people to non-bank custodians, to your point, that may or may not have all the safeguards associated with it. That's why I think we start over. I was very disappointed that President Biden vetoed a bipartisan bill to essentially push back a Congressional Review Act bill to push back on Staff Accounting Bulletin 121. President Biden vetoed it. And what he should have done, in my judgment, is sign it and write a letter to the SEC to just repropose the rule in the right way. Um, it was a bad move. A reminder is that our fit for purpose regulatory framework bill contains the proper way to do custody.
Mm. Final question here before I let you go. What's on your roadmap for the Digital Asset Subcommittee?
Well, first and foremost, in the committee make progress on privacy. I think that's even more important. You've seen just today the CFPB put out, or in the last 2 days, their 1033 data ownership rules. This is connected to privacy. I think we'd have to make progress there. And then stable coins and the digital assets. And then educate people on decentralized finance and educate people on how you tokenize real world assets and demonstrate the costs and benefits of that process. And we already see some major examples in the financial markets of that. I think you'll see more. And we want to bring that consumers and supervisors and members of Congress understand that can be done in the right way, have benefits to consumers, lower costs for producer of financial services products, and be done in a way that's completely, in accordance with federal oversight and prudential standards.
Congressman Hill, always a pleasure chatting with you. I appreciate it.
Hey, great to see you, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.